Sometimes the world looks like you ain't ever seen it before. Stuck behind never-ending windows, all you need is a door. Searching for something to put a smile back on your face. Just remember, in unusual times, it can come from an unusual place. You need a partner for the ride, 'cause everybody needs a Clyde. So set your worries to the side. Just ask, say the word and I'll be there. Just ask, you know the greatest things in life all come in a pair. They say hindsight's 20/20, but that ain't far enough behind me. So if you want the sweetest honey, I think hindsight's 1990. There's no need to pretend I got a hand I can lend, 'cause when you really need a friend, just ask. Shit 90 shows taught me.
Shit 90 Shows Taught Me was not filmed before a live studio audience.
Are you ready to find out what's in Meghan's box? So are we. Welcome back to Shit 90 Shows Taught Me. I'm Jess Sterling. Unfortunately, not here with my co-host because we lost her at the clinic some time back, and I really don't know what's going on over there. But we do have a very special guest joining us today, Todd the Librarian, who hopefully can shed some light on what is a truly unhinged episode of Felicity. Todd, how are you?
I'm good. Can I shed some light? You'll find out soon enough.
This episode, I mean, I was not mentally prepared for this episode, Todd, and it's one of those ones that because of we took our week off, Sara is still in the midst of unpacking everything she just moved, so she's going to join us back next week. But I was just, we had a break, and so I was like, oh, I can watch the Felicity episode because I was hoping. I'm like, oh, I'll find out what's going on with Ben and Felicity. Nope. We're full on black and white, no explanation. They just dump us into this really strange world, which I'm hoping you can explain to me, Todd.
I can explain a little bit. I can't explain why they put this episode where they put it. The placement is bizarre, especially with the to be continued from previous. I feel like the to be continued might have been like, okay, next one's gonna be weird, but we promise we're coming back to this. I don't know. I don't know why they did it when they did it. But I can tell you a little bit about why they did it in the grander scheme. So for those of you who are watching this and had zero clue what was going on, this was J.J. Abrams. This was J.J. Abrams' homage to one of his all-time favorite TV series, The Twilight Zone.
Okay. So, and that makes sense because I have not seen the Twilight Zone. Like, I know about it. Like, everyone knows that the Twilight Zone exists. Is that the one that's like da-na-na-na-na-na-na? Is that? Yes. Okay. So I know that. That is basically the extent of my knowledge. And I know it's like weird. It's like offbeat. But that's what I know about the Twilight Zone.
Yeah. So the Twilight Zone was a TV anthology series. It ran for 5 seasons from 1959 to 1964. I basically watched most of it. I haven't finished the whole series. I started like binge watching it a couple of years ago and then got distracted partway through the 4th season because the 4th season of the Twilight Zone, they decided to go to hour-long episodes. And I mean,
they were 30 minutes before.
They were like, it was like little 30-minute episodes. And then for the 4th season, they decided to go to hour. And I'm talking about like, and I'm watching on Paramount Plus. The Paramount Plus episode is nearly an hour. So it's even longer with commercials.
Jeez Louise, yeah.
And as much as I enjoy the Twilight Zone, it's not a show that's necessarily designed for the plots to last a full hour. Because the Twilight Zone episodes usually are kind of like both of the little vignettes in this episode. It was like a black and white kind of sci-fi, fantasy, horror thing, which usually had some sort of twist. Like Twilight Zone was really known for having a twist. And for example, there's one where aliens come and people are worried about them, but they think they're fine. And then they try to figure out what this book that the people are reading all the time is about, and they translate the title as To Serve Man. Like, oh, to serve man, they're going to serve mankind. They realize, no, to serve man means to serve them as dinner. They're going to eat us.
Yeah.
That's the kind of a twist that the Twilight Zone
Okay.
would often have. There's like another famous one about a person called, I think it's called Eye of the Beholder, where there's a whole thing is from the point of view of this person who's like in surgery, and they're all talking about like her looks and how she's, how she's disfigured and everything. They're going to try and fix her looks, and then at the end you find out that she looks like a human, but everyone, all the doctors and the rest of the people look like people with big pig noses, and so it's like, oh, she's hideous, she's deformed because she looks like beautiful by our standards.
That's so funny. Okay.
Thing.
It seems kind of like almost like Black Mirror before Black Mirror existed.
Very much so. So Rod Serling, the man who created the show and would be the narrator of the show, had like a really big social conscience. Like he there are so many anti-war episodes in Twilight Zone. Lots of stories about soldiers realizing the folly of war and things like that. There's a very strong like anti-Nazi episode in the 4th season. And so, there's like some really strong political messaging through a lot of the Twilight Zone. And then there's just some fun, goofy episodes. There's an episode with Carol Burnett who gets a guardian angel who can't make her happy, just like this really kind of goofy thing. So it runs the gamut in terms of tone and time and place. But the big thing is like the majority of the time there was some sort of message they're trying to get across. And the majority of the time there was some sort of twist. So this episode is like the part with the clinic feels very much just like a Twilight Zone episode. That could have been like the impetus for a Twilight Zone episode with no problem. And then the last half, which is the part that I remembered. So whenever I went into this, I have completely forgotten about the clinic part of it. I only remember the box part because of Meghan's box, but also because it is a direct homage to a very specific episode of the Twilight Zone. Season 3, episode 14, 5 characters in search of an exit.
Come on now, even the title.
Yeah. So the episode aired in December 1961, and it starts off with this guy in this military uniform waking up in not a big like square rectangular area, but a big rounded area. Like what they're in, like this big round. There's no corners for people to come out of, and he's dressed in a military uniform. And he's immediately runs into a guy dressed like a clown. There's also a ballerina, a hobo, and a bagpiper. And the 5 of these people, these very unique outfits and personalities, are trying to figure out where they are, how they got there. And they, much like in this episode, they form a human ladder, although it's not quite tall enough, so the brigadier has to like take his sword and fashion a rope to grapple the side to pull himself the rest of the way up. Sorry, not brigadier, major. As the major gets to the top, he falls out, and we cut to a doll in the snow, and it's actually like a kind of like a Salvation Army Christmas time doll drive. Like they're trying to get dolls for a toy drive. And so the 5 dolls are all things that people have donated. And then this little girl picks the doll up and gives it to the lady ringing her bell. There's also a big thing about the 5 characters like holding their ears because there's this massive bell ringing that's so loud.
Yeah.
It actually knocks their human ladder down one time because it's so loud. It's a woman ringing her bell going, dolls for Christmas. So yeah, it's one of those like kind of like infamous episodes of the Twilight Zone.
Yeah.
And so that last bit is like, the first part is like an homage to general Twilight Zone vibes, and the last bit is like direct, parody homage of an actual episode. And what's funny is like in my head, because I remember that part so much, I thought the entire episode was them in the box. And then I came back to watch like, oh no, the box part is only like 10 minutes of the entire episode. It's like such a small slice. So I had completely forgotten. But yeah, so why did they do this? Because J.J. Abrams likes Twilight Zone, and J.J. Abrams wanted to do a Twilight Zone episode, and this kind of got him in the space of like, this is J.J. Abrams' first major show to be a producer of. And after this, he wanted to do Alias, which is a spy show, but had some really heavy sci-fi plot points at times. There's like prophecy type stuff in there. There's this big like sci-fi MacGuffin thing going on. There's like some really weird stuff that goes on in Alias as the show goes on. And then what do you do after Alias? Lost. And we know how weird and sci-fi Lost got. And then he finally went to Fringe, which is just straight up sci-fi. And of course, movie-wise, he did Super 8 and Star Trek and Star Wars, so JJ has a big sci-fi bent. Like JJ loves sci-fi, and most of the projects that JJ did after Felicity had like huge sci-fi trappings. And so this is like the first time of JJ really dipping his toe into like the sci-fi thing, going, can I do this?
Yeah.
And he did. I remember it being a big deal when it came out. Because again, I watched the show when it first aired.
Yeah, that was going to be my question, is what the audience reaction was, not even just to like the fact that they are taking a major diversion from like the normal everyday Felicity plot, but the placement of it between a to be continued and then like the follow-up. It just feels very strange. I feel like, obviously, I mean, I'm watching this on a week-to-week basis, and I can tell you right now, I was a bit frustrated in terms of like, but what the heck? Like, I want to know what's going on with Ben and Felicity, and to have to wait another week for people to find out, I'm sure there had to be some frustration.
Yeah, the placement, I think, has always been the biggest ding against the episode. I think in terms of execution, I think critically it was like really well received. I think a lot of people really appreciated what it was going for, because I think it's like a really well done episode. The timing is definitely the biggest black mark against it. But you also have to remember, this was like a very different time in terms of how people consumed TV. And how TV was marketed. I remember there was like a big article about this upcoming Twilight Zone episode before it even came out in TV Guide. So it was the thing. It was like a known thing that this was going to be like
people knew
a
it was
weird
coming up.
Yeah. So if anyone paid any attention to just like the TV Guide, which TV Guide was a fairly ubiquitous publication back in the day, that if anyone paid any attention to what the chatter was about, they knew this was coming. They knew it was going to be a Twilight Zone episode. It's not like people like just watching it online and not doing any research before because they don't want to spoil themselves. So spoilers weren't really, because these publications wouldn't necessarily spoil big things that were going to happen. They talk about like what the plot of the episode was, or have interviews about what's coming up. Because I remember like reading about this before it happened and being really excited to see what they would do with the Twilight Zone thing. Because at that point in time, I'd seen a good portion of Twilight Zone, but not a ton of Twilight Zone. So I think there's definitely were people who were upset, definitely people who wanted to know what was going on, didn't like having the to be continued interrupted. But at the same time, there was warning, and so you could maybe mentally prepare yourself for it a little bit better than just watching it on a binge or watching the way that you are. Like, okay, you do not want to look anything up on the internet because you have no idea where the spoilers are going to jump out at you. So yeah, it's this really weird episode in lots of different ways. There was recently an episode, there's a podcast out there where there's another Felicity Rewatch podcast out there with Amanda Foreman, who plays Meghan, and some other people. And they actually had an episode recently where they talked about this, and they had J.J. Abrams on to talk about it.
Oh, no kidding.
And I listened to it to see if I could get any like good tidbits to share. There really wasn't a whole lot there that to talk about. They didn't go very in-depth into it, because basically, apparently, it was like they had this big, long conversation with JJ and Matt Reeves at one point, and then would just occasionally pull clips from that interview and put it into their episodes. And so there wasn't like they're going to sit down to talk to JJ about this episode in particular. It was more of a, we talk about JJ about a whole bunch of different stuff, and we'll have this one little slice of that conversation pulled in here. It was still kind of an interesting listen, but there wasn't a whole lot of like really strong stuff to talk about. The only thing which I had already knew, I want to make sure I mention, is this episode was directed by a man named Lamont Johnson. Okay. And normally people who direct episodes, you don't pay attention to unless it's like one of the actors or a big name director. Like, never Quentin Tarantino directed an episode of ER. It was like a big deal back in the day. Lamont Johnson was a pretty prolific director back in the 50s and 60s and 70s. He directed 8 episodes of The Twilight Zone.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. Okay.
Including 5 Characters in Search of an Exit. He was the director of that episode. So they brought him in to make sure the episode had that Twilight Zone feel. And they nailed it. If you've never watched The Twilight Zone, then this episode just feels weird. But if you watch The Twilight Zone, this episode feels weird in a way like, oh, this is exactly the Twilight Zone. The way that they're acting, like the way that the sets look, the way the camera angles are, just everything in it just perfectly evokes an episode of the classic Twilight Zone from the 50s and 60s. And a large part of that is not just because J.J. Abrams is a huge fan of the Twilight Zone and was able to nail that. It's because he has Lamont Johnson, who worked on 8 episodes of the show and was able to bring that skill set in.
Yeah, that's wild. Because I agree with you. Like, I don't know really a ton about the Twilight Zone, obviously. And so watching this with no context, I was like, okay, it's in black and white. That's interesting. And then it's like you said, it's very different. There's like long pauses there. You know what I mean? The music, obviously, even the intro music is very different. Obviously the style of the characters, everything they're wearing, different than usual. So yeah, it was more of, I was just a little lost than I think the biggest, like you said, the biggest indictment on this episode is its placement. I think if I'm given this episode at a different time in the season, obviously the content of it might be different, but I kind of feel like you could plug and play this one almost anywhere. I probably would be like a little more excited for it, but because it fell in between like 2 episodes that obviously needed to be back to back, is where I was a little bit like, what the heck did I just watch? However, I do think it's pretty genius. And I don't know if you know this, Todd, like the utilization of what's in Meghan's box, the mystery around what's in the box, and then them using it in the way they did, I thought was absolutely genius. I'm curious to know, was this like always the plan? Did they have this set up from the moment they introduced Meghan's box, that it's like, we're going to do a Twilight Zone episode later,
No, it was definitely not the plan for the beginning with Meghan's box. The plan for Meghan's box from the beginning was, let's just have this weird thing. It's like,
yeah,
and it's not even like they weren't necessarily planning it to be like a mystery box type thing, but it's more like you're moving in with this roommate who's just this really bizarre person, and they have this one bizarre trait that they care about, and you would never have cared about it if they didn't make it a big deal, but they make it such a big deal that you can't help but wonder. And so it was originally created, not that this was like leading up to a Twilight Zone thing, because I don't think they ever thought when they started Felicity that they would have the chance to do something like this. It was originally created just to be this is weird. And so this was a chance to, okay, we can kind of answer what's in the box without really answering what's in the box. And it's a shame Sara isn't here today, because I know Sara has a bet with her partner about whether
we're gonna have to find out if she gets a purse next week. Yeah,
I mean,
because in one way,
I feel like we should make the determination ourselves. So she's not here to discuss the episode. I think maybe
I like this. Yes, I
don't think Sara will like that, but
I think we should be able to say, and I think we'll save it till the end of the episode to determine whether or not Sara should get a purse based on if we find out what's really in Meghan's box. But it does strike me as funny that like J.J. Abrams is kind of obsessed with these like mystery boxes in like more than one way, right? Like you look at Lost and it's like, what if you had a magical box, right? Like it's very, very, very similar to that. But yeah, that is like some honestly really helpful background information to have as someone who is trying, like you said, can't exactly Google things for fear of being spoiled, especially with like them having their own podcast at this point. I feel like it's like even more dangerous out there now. So it's nice to have the background information going into this episode, where we start out with like Meghan and Felicity. They're in it's black and white. Like it feels different. The vibes are different. Meghan is like playing around with the box. And I immediately was like, hell yeah. What's in the box? Give me what's in the box. I don't care if it's black and white. I want to know what's in the box. And honestly, also, I know Meghan is like known for her like interesting style, right? She tends to wear like, it looks like she like a Hot Topic kind of threw up on her 90% of the time. And I loved her look this episode. I thought like the hair, the styling was like absolutely everything.
Yeah, I think Meghan was made for this era. She just looks like she fits so well, and her style is different than her normal style, but it feels like it could still be her style. I can see her walking in looking like this, kind of it's not fully witchy vibes. It's kind of what the 50s thought witchy vibes would look like a little bit.
Yes.
But yeah, even beyond the black and white, this scene immediately sets the tone because the camera's at this kind of weird angle, and Felicity, the way she delivers her lines, are a little stilted, but in a way that feels very purposeful. And you can feel like, okay, there is something really wild going on here. And at first, if you didn't know, you might have thought, hey, this could be like another dream sequence. Never she saw Lucky the dog telling her to do things a few episodes ago. But if it is a dream sequence, it's a very, very long dream sequence that doesn't reveal itself to be a dream sequence. Well, this part kind of does, but not really later on. It's weird.
Yeah. And Emily, our friend Emily, had said that she does think Meghan in this 50s styling is drop dead stunning. And I agree with Emily on her second point that the wide headband on Felicity's short hair, I think, is like the best look we've seen with the short hair so far. I still don't love it, but it's better than anything else we've seen.
Yeah, and it also feels very of the time. It feels very much of the time that they're trying to capture here. But I do agree. I think that the headband does a lot to make the hairstyle work. I do like that Felicity is finally asking, "What's with the box?" And Meghan Swan says, "You'll find out soon enough."
Yeah, it's perfectly ominous. And then we're at Dean and DeLuca, and it's like a reimagined, old school Dean and DeLuca, the cash register. The whole thing is very funny. And Noel and Felicity are having a chat all about this many years have passed and blah, blah, blah. And it's really interesting because they're really poking at the love triangle, right? We see Ben is also working there, and Felicity is kind of just looking between them, very obviously, we know where we left off. She had the pool encounter with Ben, but she also there's still something going on with Noel and her with all the kiss and stuff. And then this very strange woman comes in, and I was like, this lady is creeping me the heck out. She's very invasive, pretty much immediately.
Yeah, she has shark eyes, doll eyes.
Yes!
Her eyes, it looks like she doesn't have pupils. And I don't know if it's just a trick at the camera, if they did special contact lenses, or just how her eyes look. But it's almost like her eyes themselves are so dark you can't tell where the pupil ends and the iris. You can't really tell.
Yes.
But it looks like she just has black doll eyes, and it is so disconcerting.
Yeah, I think it's a combo of both her natural eyes and how she's keeping them open so wide, and just and the makeup that goes along with it. But she's just oh, you look like you're in trouble. And she gives Felicity a business card for quote unquote the clinic. And she's like, it's help for the forlorn, which is of course the title of the episode. And Felicity's like, the clinic. And the lady says, oh yeah, if you're having basically relationship woes, give them a call. They can help you. And again, one look of this lady and I'd be like, absolutely not, right in the garbage bin. This card is going, because she was wigging me the heck out. But Felicity, she seems interested. I mean, I guess desperate times, desperate measures, Todd. I don't know.
Yeah, she's obviously still upset about Noel and Ben. And she has heartache, and this woman's telling her, I can cure your heartache. The line the woman gives I really liked is, for the incurable romantic, the clinic is the cure. And that has to, Felicity is dealing with all these feelings and all this struggle. And if you just take that away, then that could be worth looking into. Plus it's a Twilight Zone episode, so you have to, whenever the stranger comes and gives you the mysterious card about a mysterious place, you have to go check it out. That's just the rule of the Twilight Zone.
It's required, but honestly, I was never more convinced that this lady was some sort of psychopath than when she placed her order for a bagel, plain. You're just eating a dry bagel? What is wrong with you? Seriously, unhinged behavior. I've never buttered bagel. Sure, of course, you want to be a little on the small side. Normally people order them with cream cheese. Could be even a bacon, egg, and cheese. But just a plain bagel? What is this woman doing?
Yeah, I will admit I'm not a big bagel person, largely just because where I'm from, bagels aren't as
they
big
don't
a
have
thing.
good bagels there.
But I agree that a plain bagel would not be it.
This lady's strange. So she says she called the clinic. She waited for 3 months, but Felicity shouldn't wait that long. And yeah, so she ends up calling the clinic. There's like a narrator too that's kind of like voicing over, which is interesting and very different because normally Felicity is our narrator of the show.
Did you recognize the voice of the narrator?
Oh gosh, no, I didn't. Hold on. This is Sally, isn't it?
Yes, it's
that
Sally.
Bitch Sally, she's back.
Yes,
no, I didn't the first time. No.
Yeah, Sally is doing the Rod Serling thing. So I mentioned Rod Serling was a creator of the Twilight Zone, and he would act as the narrator of the episode. He usually would he would actually physically appear in the episodes a lot of the times. Not always, but a lot of the times. You suddenly just like, so for example, in this scene, and just to talk about what you said, that's because reimagine Dean DeLuca, it feels very much like an old TV show because it's very minimalist. It's very bare bones. Like normally, on the show, your Dean DeLuca is like filled with customers and there's all this stuff around. This is just like maybe 4 tables with like 2 people at them, and one of those people is Noel. And there's like hardly anybody in the shop. There's hardly any decorations. It's like very bare bones, very minimalist, which feels very much like a show from the time period because they're working on very small budgets and getting things done really quickly and all. But so like example, normally like an episode like this, you might like pan to the corner of the restaurant and suddenly there's Rod Serling staying there doing his little narration. And then he would like do his narration at the end. And again, he didn't always show up physically. A lot of times it was voiceover, but sometimes he'd show up, sometimes he would. But so for example, here's an example of Rod Serling's opening narration for the 5 characters in search of an exit. Clown, hobo, ballet dancer, bagpiper, and an army major. A collection of question marks. 5 improbable entities stuck together into a pit of darkness. No logic, no reason, no explanation. Just a prolonged nightmare in which fear, loneliness, and the unexplainable walk hand in hand through the shadows. In a moment, we'll start collecting clues as to the whys, the whats, and the wheres. We will not end the nightmare. We will only explain it, because this is the Twilight Zone. And that's the sort of thing that would like every episode would have that kind of opening narration. And usually it'd be like they found themselves in the Twilight Zone. Like it would always end with like someone like this sort of thing that could only happen in the Twilight Zone. That'd be like every single one would kind of end with that little stinger. So I was the only ding I have against this opening narration is it didn't really have, I mean, the ending had something similar to that, but the opening thing didn't have a "This is Twilight Zone" related thing. But yeah, as soon as Sally started talking, I was like, "Sally's our Rod Serling? Wild."
Oh yeah. I mean, I don't need to hear Sally's voice, but I guess it's fine if this is the situation. Whatever. I mean, to be fair,
recognize Sally's voice the first time because she
I didn't recognize because it's like lower, it's like a deeper register or something she's doing.
Yeah, because she's doing a Rod Serling impression. She's basically doing an impression of how Rod Serling would have done things. So if I didn't already know Jeanine Garofalo's voice so well just from seeing her in like tons of things over the years, I don't know if it would have jumped out to me immediately, but knowing Jeanine Garofalo's voice, like, oh yeah, that's Jeanine Garofalo doing a Rod Serling impression.
Felicity calls and she ends up going to the clinic and she gets like this interview where they ask her some really interesting questions. They ask her if she's had surgery before and Felicity's like, whoa. Like, I think Felicity thought this was like a therapy sort of thing or like a help seminar, not surgery. And she's like, my tonsils when I was 8. And she asks like how long you've been experiencing heartache. And this I thought was really funny when she's like, oh, it's when I came to New York 15 months ago. She says, I've really only been with 2 people ever. 3 if you count David. And I was like, you dated David. Like you actually dated David. Like you've never actually dated Ben. So I thought this was hilarious that David is the one who gets cut out.
Yeah. And then she goes, well, 4 kind of. So we got to throw Eli in there.
Yeah, our guy Eli, gotta get that our guy Eli bump. Yeah.
But that's a good point. Poor David.
It's so funny. It's just like, oh, ouch, jeez. But yeah, so this is very much in line with what we've heard about Felicity, especially from Noel, that she's like a hopeless romantic. So she puts so much of her time and investment into romance. And she says, I don't know why, like love just really matters to me. Ben matters to me. Noel matters to me. And she's tired of it. She wants to have all of those things removed. She doesn't want to care about either guy anymore. She thinks it's going to be like some sort of psychotherapy. I don't know. This would give me the heebie-jeebies just being in this office, Todd, because it's I mean, obviously it's the old school looking sorts of offices, but it looks very sterile and weird. It does not look like a therapist's office, like a comfy couch and like cozy vibes. This immediately gave me bad vibes of like, this is a creepy doctor office.
Yeah, no, totally. I think again that's the vibe they're going for. It is again minimalist because of the time frame that is evoking, but also it's meant to be unsettling. And yeah, if Felicity walked into this office and met with like an actual doctor in a lab coat, then what she thinks is going on, I don't know. But again, it's a different time, and people didn't know as much about what doctors did, and I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, just sign here. No big deal. It's like, what am I signing up? She's like, well, the sooner you sign, the sooner you get to see the doctor. And so Felicity, as a lot of people do, kind of just like falls for this. Then she's getting like a physical exam, and the doctor is very like evasive when it comes to all of her questions. Like, why am I getting a physical? He says, oh, well, not everyone qualifies for the treatment. And she's like, what is the treatment? And he like brings her back. He's like checking her heart rate or something. And then we get some real sketchy nonsense of, here, just drink this water out of a tiny, tiny cup. What?
And he's so insistent about it too. It's like, well, I wouldn't want to waste the cup. Then you drink it. You drink the water.
Waste the cup. How much do these cups cost? It's like a Dixie cup. That's like 10 cents. Not even. Get out of here.
This economy, Jess? I mean, come on.
And so Felicity books it out of there. Like, she's like weirded out. She wants to leave. Like, they're really creeping her out. And then she gets a package, and it's so weird. It's like a tiny glass heart container, I guess, and inside of it is a clinic business card. And I'm like, this is so freaking sketchy, man. Like, they know where I live. I mean, obviously you probably put your address on the forms, but still.
Yeah. I mean, they know she gave him her address and that stuff. So, and maybe it's a nice gesture, like we're trying to help and give us that chance. Except the thing that we learned is that the postmark and everything was before she actually went to the clinic. They sent this before she even contacted them, in theory.
Yes.
So how did they know about her? How was this all happening? It's a little weird.
Yeah, it's off. It's certainly off. And she's really freaked out by it. She goes to Elena to try to be like, I need your help. Like, weird stuff is happening. I went to this clinic. I don't understand. He wanted to try to draw my blood. And I love Elena saying, maybe it's an office of vampires. Because it's like, with an episode this weird, it could be, certainly could be.
Yeah, and Felicity's like, you laugh, but that's what it felt like. Felicity's all bought in. Yes, this is a vampire office. I also like that Felicity says something about it, like feeling desperate. And Elena's response is, you understand that's because you're desperate, right?
Yeah. And I think it's Elena that talks about going to there was a church that was offering like a happiness test. And she's like, I actually took it. How lame is that?
Yeah. And then she says, and they made me buy this book, which makes me think, is this a shot at Scientology? Because that feels very like going in, taking a test, and depending on the test, and you're trying to buy a book. It feels very much like what Scientology is based around.
That's a good call. Yeah.
So it's the first time I ever thought about that, but they're just like, it's kind of, because Felicity's kind of distracted by the guy like at the window. And so you're kind of focused on that. But I didn't notice the first watch, but I rewatched it last night and it was like, wait a second, buy the book, happiness test. So it feels like just a kind of throwaway, maybe dig at Scientology. Maybe not. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but that kind of feels what Elena is talking about there.
Yeah. And I love when Felicity gets distracted by the guy, she's like, there's a guy over there. And I love Elena. Is he cute? No, he looks dead. Then just say no thank you. It's so funny. She's very distracted by this man who's doing like gestures, like he's like his head and his eyebrows, he's gesturing at her. And Elena asks like, oh, what did you take while you were there? Because Elena turns around and there's not a man there. She's like, what did you take? Did you like take anything? Did they give you anything? She's like, oh, just the water. And it's like, okay, well, we all know that it was not water at this point. Like something is going on. Why is she seeing this random man? And yeah, Todd, this was very concerning when Felicity is suddenly seeing a person that's not, at least in our opinion, really there.
Yeah, it's never a good sign. Never a good sign whenever you're seeing things that other people don't see. And whether it's because of the water or something else, like maybe she thinks the water, maybe something else is going on. At this point, you don't know, is there something really supernatural going on, or is it just like she's been drugged? Yeah, it's really hard to tell because it's the Twilight Zone episode. My mind automatically went to like supernatural things more than like being drugged things. But I think in the way the episode plays out, like the drugging in the water might make more sense. Although even then, I'll just say, the plot in this episode doesn't necessarily all hang together, and that's fine because it's not really.
It doesn't necessarily need to. Yeah. And so she finds him in, like you were saying, like it makes a lot more sense now, the aesthetics of the episode in terms of like normally if you're in a library, it would be like books packed all over the place, like very tight corners in terms of like, not a bunch of room to walk around. It looks like they're very like bare industrial shelves of books, in here. And she finds the man and he is basically trying to warn her against the clinic. He says, find a way out. Don't let it happen to you. That, they're on to me. I can't let them see me. You still have a chance. And then he says, stay away from snow. And it's like, what? And he says, like, don't get the procedure. Don't let them do it. And she says, I left the clinic. Like, I'm not going to get it. And he says, yes, you are. Don't you understand? They're doing to you right now. And it's just like, okay, what? Stay away from snow. I mean, it makes sense, Todd, because like you said, this is right after winter break, right? So we're in New York in the winter. So there is a chance of like weather related snow.
Yeah. And all this stuff will make more sense by the big reveal at the end of this section of the episode. The whole, they're doing it to you right now, and the snow, it all becomes clear later on. But at this point, I was like, wait, it's just like the sort of cryptic thing that someone would say in this sort of situation, just to throw some really random thing out there. And then you're expecting for something to happen where you're thinking it's going to be weather, but then it turns out to be something else, which is what happens in this case.
Yeah. And I like that Elena is the one she's bouncing all of this off, Todd, because Elena does really feel like the voice of reason and like the voice of reality in a lot of episodes. So she's kind of the perfect, like steadying force for Felicity in this episode, the one that can logic things out and be like, it doesn't make sense. How did he disappear? And then she's checking the newspaper to see if it's going to snow. It's just a perfect role for Elena in this episode.
Yeah, that was my favorite bit. I'm going to see if there's going to be snow, so make sure you don't just disappear on me suddenly. Yeah. Elena is great in this episode. Lots of fun Elena moments. Yeah, I do think that she is serving the usual Elena role. She's not necessarily blurting out Felicity's secrets to anybody in this episode.
Yes, thankfully.
It's better that we avoid that aspect of Elena's personality this time around.
Yeah. And this freaking lady, this creepy lady who orders a weird plain bagel, she comes back. She has her creepy eyes all the way open again. And she's just like, oh, I heard that you left. You really should go back. That's what they wanted me to tell you. And Felicity's like, what the hell? She's like, can I get you anything? A plain bagel? She remembered her order because it's so freaking weird. I know this is a weird episode, but like, I know I'm getting hyper fixated on the bagel, but it is such a strange order. Unless you're like, I have my own personal jam or something that I would like to put on this bagel. Like, who the hell goes to a coffee shop and buys a plain bagel? Like,
look, once you've had your heart surgically removed, you don't need all those extra accoutrements with your bagel. You just eat it as the good Lord intended, plain and boring. You don't need all that excitement of like condiments. Ugh.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So she leaves and she gives Felicity another business card. Like Felicity has like 4 of these at this point. So she calls the clinic the thing I want to give credit to this episode is that the characters still feel like themselves despite the weird situation that they're in, right? Like Felicity, this felt real that Felicity had this woman come in to talk to her and be like, you should go back, blah, blah, blah. like Felicity is the person who's going to call and be like, excuse me, can you like stop? Like you're harassing me and I'm going to report you. Very, very a Felicity thing to do.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think the writers did do a good job of somehow mimicking the style of the original series, but still capturing the voices of the characters and having them do things that would make logical sense for those characters to do within the bounds of what logic means for a Twilight Zone episode. Like Felicity, like saving the card and going to the clinic in the first place, maybe it's not a thing that Felicity would normally do. But also, this is a girl who flew across the country because a guy wrote in her yearbook. So
yes,
Felicity does impulsive things quite a bit. So I think that also kind of fits what Felicity would do. But when Felicity gets upset, Felicity will lash out like this. And so her calling and threatening to call someone on them for the harassment, I agree, like makes complete and total sense for Felicity. And the nurse on the other end just going, okay, I'll take care of it.
And so that night, Felicity's little recorder, I thought this was a really good use of her tape recorder that she uses to send tapes to Sally with. She hears Felicity, open 67. And she's like really freaked out because there's not even a tape in the recorder. And Meghan gets woken up and she's like, I just love that Meghan can be the voice of the people sometimes.
Yes.
And she just is like, are you ever going to stop making those stupid tapes? It's perfect. Like chef's freaking kiss to Meghan in this episode.
Yeah, that felt like very much a fourth wall breaking moment. That felt very much like, okay, guys, we hear you. We've heard the complaints. Don't worry. Now, whether they're going to keep doing the tapes or not, who knows? But I do like them hanging a lampshade all of it. That's one of my favorite moments of the episode is Meghan making fun of the tapes. Yeah,
it's perfect. It really is. And so the next day, Felicity's obviously exhausted. She's like falling asleep at the library. Julie walks up. And again, I thought it was really, really good acting because I felt like immediately something was off with Julie. Like she seemed, I don't even know how to explain it, more like prim and proper and like demure almost. Like she just felt a little strange. And she says like, oh, like, do you want to tell me what's going on? And she's like, no, you're going to think that I'm losing my mind. And Julie says like, no, I won't. And like Julie then says, oh, the clinic called me. They told me what happened and they want you to go back. And it's just like, wait, what? And you find out that Julie says, oh, how do you think I got over Ben? How do you think I got over you betraying me? I got the procedure.
Yeah, I like that. I like the fact that she actually says, how do you think I forgave you? Why would I forgive you unless I had my heart ripped out, my emotions stripped? Yeah, but fair point, Julie, I guess. Although you forgave Ben before you forgave Felicity, but whatever. Not going to rehash that. But no, I agree. Like Julie definitely feels a little off. And at first it's hard to tell, is she off just because it's a Twilight Zone episode? Because everyone's a little off, but she's off to a slightly more degree than everyone else is. Everyone else is doing I think out of everyone, Elena is the closest to just being Elena. Elena feels like she is just Elena thrust into this world. Her line reads don't feel particularly mannered or over stylized. Felicity is like probably the next where her line reads are kind of over stylized a bit, but she still feels very Felicity. But I think both Noel and Julie feel that Noel is like himself, but this hyper version of himself. Yeah. Like the one scene we've seen of Noel so far, whenever he's ordering, it definitely feels, this is Noel, but it's not Noel. But Julie is the one who is completely different because she has had the procedure at this point. And so, but at first, like, oh, is this just how, Amy Jo is going to read the Twilight Zone lines? And then you realize, oh no, it's not just her trying as an actress trying to fit into this weird zone. It's, her as an actress playing the character who has had this weird procedure done.
Yeah. And I do think I think the way all of the actors are acting in this episode is honestly pretty perfect. Like, especially because she does seem like someone who's in a cult. Like, she's like, oh, I know it seems cult-like, but you just get fanatics with everything, you know? And it's very cult, like, it's the best thing I've ever done. And she's not allowed to talk about the treatment because there's an NDA. And, you know, Felicity's begging her, like, please let me know, like, what this is. What are they doing? Yeah, I felt like it was really good acting on Julie's part for being like, for having gone through a procedure that, like, we're not even sure what it is at this point. But she did seem like she was involved in like a cult. like call your parents, you're in a cult, please. So then this is where I got a little confused. Like, did Felicity get a job, like, cleaning a lab or something? They really didn't explain what was going on here, like, why she was in this lab in the first place.
Yeah, it's very out of the blue. It's very much unexplained. Because I watched this a few weeks ago, and then I watched it again yesterday. I'm like, okay, on this watch, I'm going to see, do they explain this? And they do not. She's just kind of there. Like I said, it's kind of assumed that she's gotten a job in this lab, which would make sense if she was still like a med student, but she's not a med student anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
So I don't know why. But again, at this point, as we'll learn, this is like dream logic. This is very much Felicity under anesthesia hallucinating things. And so I guess we don't necessarily need an explanation of why she's here, because it's all part of a dream within a dream, maybe. Again, it's unclear exactly what's going on with this first part of the episode, but yeah, they definitely do not explain, and you're kind of like forced to extrapolate, oh, she's gotten another job.
Yeah, it's really interesting. This is the one thing that I was like very confused about, and like didn't really work for me because I didn't understand what was going on. I'm like, what, she's working in a morgue now? Like, what is going, you know, I think it's just a lab and it's like supposed to be a cadaver or something. This man, I mean, obviously this is Twilight Zone, so like whatever, we're buying in, but like, you ever seen a dead body? No. And then he just goes to open, like, dude, no, sir, no one wants to see dead bodies. Like, stop it. What are you doing? Not
I
great.
mean, you got a dead body to show off. You got to show it off.
This man is so creepy. And yeah, he's even creepier when he says, oh, a girl like you alone in a place like this, dead bodies all around. I wouldn't want that job. And it's like, well, I don't now because you're weirding me out, man. Like, what do you, like, oh, you're all alone. It's like, this guy was almost creepier than the doctor, honestly. And so Felicity is alone in the room and she hears a voice saying her name, and she sees that the box or whatever container that the body is in, the cadaver is in, has 67 on it, which was from the open 67 on the recording tape. And I don't know. If it's me, I probably just leave. I don't think I even open the cadaver box. You know, I think I'm just like, nope, I am out of here. But she opens it and then she unzips the bag. And I'm like, this is only bad things can happen, Todd. Only bad things are happening from here.
And she doesn't unzip the bag until it tells her, unzip me. Unzip me. As the body in the bag is still like kind of, you know, you can see its outline and it's moving around and talking and going, unzip me. This is full horror movie vibe right here. This is like the big horror part of the Twilight Zone going on. And yeah, in real life, you would like, nope, and run away. But horror movie logic, Twilight Zone logic, Felicity has to find out. She has to find out what's happening to her.
Yeah, it's creepy. And he says, this is how they cure a broken heart. They rip your heart right out of your chest. It's what they're going to do to you. And he has like this big scar on his chest. And so Felicity goes back to the clinic and she's yelling at them like, what did you put in the water? I want to see the doctor. I've been seeing things. I've been hearing things. Like, I'm having conversations with people that don't exist. And as Felicity is talking to the doctor, the nurse is like coming up behind her with like the biggest freaking needle of all time. It's horrifying.
Man, it was the 60s. Needles were bigger back then.
I mean, can you imagine being a person who with a phobia of needles back then? Because like nowadays, I feel like most needles are not that big. Maybe I'm wrong. Like, doctors, feel free to correct me. I just feel like nowadays they're a more manageable size.
Yeah, I think most of the time that I'm getting any sort of shot, it usually is a much smaller thing. But I think it also depends on what sort of shot you're getting and what sort of dosage you need, like the size of the needle. But I do think that most of the time you're a doctor's office, you're not seeing a needle like this. This is like a horse tranquilizer sized needle that's coming at Felicity in this moment. One thing I kind of stood out to me during this is as Felicity's the doctor's like, okay, maybe you're hallucinating all this. Did you think about that? And then she holds up the glass heart. It's like, what about this? This arrived at my place and you said before I even came here, I'd explain this. And the doctor says, do you ever think that maybe you're hallucinating the glass heart? I'm like, sir, did she tell you what she was holding out in front of you? She did not. I was expecting Felicity to jump like, I never said it was a glass heart. How do you know? But she didn't. But that was the thing that jumped out at me is like, do you think you're hallucinating the glass heart? Like, she didn't tell you what it was, sir. You just like completely blew your cover right there by saying that you can see the thing that you're accusing her of hallucinating.
Yeah. And I don't know, Todd, do you know, is this like a quote from something? How do you know, what does he say? How do you know where truth ends and fantasy begins? Is that a quote from something?
Doesn't necessarily sound familiar. Like it's just sort of a thing that would fit in this sort of episode for me. I don't, it's not ringing a bell as like a direct quote from anything.
Yeah, I'm not seeing anything. I just thought it was like a really good line that I'm like, dang, and she says, no, I know this isn't real. I can, if I flick myself, I can feel it, blah, blah, blah. And he says, oh, whatever's the matter with your arm? Like, we should get that checked out. And he wants to see her arm. And she says, get away from me. She turns around and sees the massive freaking needle in the nurse's hand. It's so big. It's really the thing. I mean, needle plus like plastic, spot where the liquid goes. That whole thing is like the size of her forearm. It's so ridiculous. And she yells at them, like, get away from me. The doctor tries to say, like, oh, this is what's best for you. And honestly, if I'm Felicity, I'm throwing the glass heart at the woman with the needle, not at the wall.
True, but again, Twilight Zone, you're not going to be attacking someone else probably on screen. Got to, appease the censors with the TV violence. So you just throw the thing at the wall to shatter and have them both cover their eyes from the shards of glass coming flying at them. It's very dramatic in a way that I kind of love. That is like, makes no sense, but it's also very fun.
Yeah. And then, so she ends up in the arms of Noel, and this is probably because of, like, again, it being Twilight Zoney, but it was very like damsel in distress almost, right? Where she's like hugging him, sobbing into his arms, like, oh, I'm losing my mind. Like, what if there wasn't actually a man there telling me to beware of the snow? Maybe Julie's right. Maybe I didn't even talk to Julie. Like, she's like really having an epic meltdown in a way that I would expect of Felicity. Like, I would expect her to be upset and have these conversations with Noel. But I think it was like the over the top, like hugging and sobbing that I was like, okay, I think this is for the show more than it is actually Felicity.
Yeah. I mean, granted, she is on the verge of a full blown melt. She has had corpses talking to her. So if she is sobbing, I'll give her a pass.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so funny. She says, I just want to, it's very dramatic. I just want to lose this emptiness in my heart that I was willing to do anything. I'm so stupid. And I think Noel has said this before, like because I remember being like, Noel, this is very inappropriate because you are with Ruby, where he was like, oh, your superpower's love or whatever the hell. Like, yeah, that's the thing I love most about you is how much you love. You're just willing to like put it all out there for love. And Noel is trying to talk her down and, they were real. Like, don't worry about it. Everything was real. I believe in you. And as he's going to like change, she sees Todd. He has the glass heart on a table next to the couch.
Yeah, of course. Like what you think is going to be the final twist of the episode there. Yeah. I do want to point out, whenever he talks about bleeding her, his line is, that's my burden, always believing in you. Mm-hmm. Which is like, ooh, ouch. That's a kind of like pointed thing to say. It's not just like, I'll always believe you. Like, that's my burden. It is a burden to always believe in you, Felicity. Which thing,
but it's perfect. Like,
yeah.
it's true and it's perfect, you know?
I know. I love it so much. Like, it's like, again, it's like such a perfect encapsulation of what Noel probably feels, but wouldn't say in a normal episode, probably. But to say this, and then to see the heart, you automatically know, oh, he decided to relieve that burden. He's going to relieve that burden by having his heart removed. And yep, sure enough, that's what he did.
And as much as this is like, I mean, I assume this is kind of like a non-canonical sort of thing. Like, we're going to start the next episode and it's kind of going to pick up from where we left off in this episode before this episode. But I agree with you. Like, that feels, we've always talked about like, okay, are Felicity and Noel, you know, obviously Sara is Team Noel, and it's, do they belong together because they match each other's crazy, right? Like, they're both a little unhinged when it comes to relationships and love and their willingness to like do anything basically for it. And I love that this episode played with like Felicity and Noel kind of are two sides of the same coin, where she really is willing to do anything for love. And it's like the thing she values most in her life. She's willing to put it above everything else. And Noel is kind of similar, but with the exception of like, but only for Felicity. It is like his sole focus is Felicity. And that's what's been killing him, is that she's still always around Todd, right? Like, even after they've broken up, well, now he lives with Elena, so Felicity's always showing up and around. And the way he met Ruby is through Felicity. Like, it's just, she's always there, and it's always going to be a temptation for him to fall back into things with her. And that's the burden he bears. And the fact that like both Felicity and Noel were so heartbroken and over being heartbroken and over having to deal with those woes that they were willing to go to this clinic to get some sort of procedure to take care of it, I feel like really maps onto these two characters when we're in like their real life.
Yeah. I think the episode is the thing that a lot of really good sci-fi does, is like it takes this ridiculous concept but uses it to as a prism to show, you know, an exaggerated version of the real world. And not that Felicity regular episodes of the real world, but it's kind of the same thing. It's taking stuff and heightening it to an absurd degree to make a point. And I think that the show does a really good job of having this whole weird thing be a metaphor for the actual relationships of the characters. Yeah. And I think at the end, I'll talk about what I think the episode actually probably is like in terms of like canonical and stuff like that. But I can talk about a little. I feel like this episode works best if you see it all as one big dream that Felicity is having. I feel like this all feels like, because Noel is like, you know, all about her. There's no mention of Ruby here, even though Ruby's definitely a thing.
She's still around.
Yeah, everything is from Felicity's point of view. So, and even like Julie being the only way I could forgive you was to have my heart torn out, feels like Felicity's guilt speaking up a little bit. I feel like this episode makes the most sense if you think this is all just one big, long, extended nightmare that Felicity is having. I think that's what makes the most sense of the episode. Now, there's another interpretation I can talk about when we get to the very end, but I think on the whole, that's what makes the most sense to me. This just being a thing where Felicity is dreaming. Felicity fell asleep watching a Twilight Zone marathon, and next thing you know, she's having Rod Serling-inspired nightmares.
Yeah. Yeah. And so she talks about like wanting to report them to the police, which again, I feel like feels very Felicity to want to do. Like, I'm just going to go to the police about this. But Noel starts asking like, oh, what about the man from the library? Did he give you his name? Did you recognize him? Have you ever seen him before? And he says he has to go change before they like report this to police. And then he says, oh, it's been a while since you've seen me without my shirt on. And he has this like massive, like crescent shaped incision scar with like stitches. Like, he's obviously had the procedure recently. And apparently Julie is the one who told him about the clinic a few weeks ago. And he says, it's the only way we're all going to survive all this emotional turmoil. Who's in love with who? Who's sleeping with you? Is it really worth it? What the hell are we all looking for anyway? I love this. Again, like you're saying, they're commenting on it. It is, I guess I can kind of see why they put this here, because this episode here, because Felicity is like really waffling and having a tough choice of like, again, like the Ben or Noel situation. But I feel like, I mean, I don't know any spoilers, but I have to imagine we're going to be getting a lot more love triangle stuff before the show is over. So it really could fit anywhere. But can I tell you one of my favorite things about the costuming and design of this episode is the fact that the guys wear eyeliner. Noel has such heavy eyeliner on in this scene, and it made me so happy. It's so heavy. It's like and I mean, I guess they kind of have to. They're working in black and white, so they only they have to do something to make people look, stand out a little bit more. But it's very Pirates of the Caribbean.
Oh man, see, this is this point where it'd be good to have Sara on the pod to talk.
Yeah, to comment on
about
the
eyeliner and the makeup all, because it's not something that I necessarily noticed. So I'm sorry, listeners, I'm letting you down.
I also need to ask her when she's back next week if she also thought that because it's in black and white, you can barely see Noel's nipples. Like they almost don't exist. Like they blend in with his chest hair. And I don't know if that's just the black and white or what the deal is, but I felt the need to point it out. I don't know why. It's just true.
Yeah, it did feel like there's not a lot of definition there in shirtless Noel. I think shirtless Noel needs to do a few more push-ups.
Yeah. But he says, don't you want to never have a heartache ever again? And he's getting very aggressive with Felicity, and he says, you won't have to feel it. You could do it. Julie could do it. You just, it'll take away all of your pains. But Felicity says no, but I will miss out on the joy of love and the happiness that it brings. And he says, you don't understand what's happening. And then he starts telling her to take deep breaths because that's how the anesthesia works. And she then wakes up in the doctor's office, after the procedure, I guess.
Yeah.
It's again, it's all very happens very fast. And I'm I gotta every time you feel like you finally figured out what's happening, it's you whiplash, you gotta turn your head the other way.
Yeah, so I think the basic idea is she signed the form without even looking at it. The doctor gave her the cup of water. It knocked her out, and everything that happened after she drank the water was all her hallucination-induced dream as they're doing the procedure. Because then you see the anesthesiologist is the guy who told her to beware of snow and then was the dead body, and the doctor's name is Dr. Snow. And so it's that very classic twist that I almost always hate of, it was all a dream, and whenever I wake up I took parts from things around me and incorporated them into the dream. It's an okay twist, but it gets used way too much, I feel. As I hate whenever I watch an entire movie and then at the end you find out, oh no, it was all a hallucination. The reason things are weird is there's all this person dying and taking in things from the room or the scene, incorporating into their dying hallucination. It's been used way too many times, and it almost always annoys me when it happens now because it is just such a trope. It doesn't really bother me here because, again, they are kind of doing an homage to a show that is the birthplace of a lot of those sort of tropes. So it makes sense they would do that sort of thing. But in general, I kind of hate this sort of thing. But here, I think it works really well. Even if it is a little confusing initially. But it makes sense why everything was so weird before, because she was actually, undergoing the procedure at the time and was dreaming all of this at the time. Yeah.
Yeah. And so they show her the scar, right? They tell her, let's sedate her again. And this is when we get this is where we turn into the back half of the episode, or we're spinning things around again. We're shuffling the deck yet again. And Felicity wakes up in just a big empty room, and she's confused. Noel is there, and he says no, he felt the same way. And Felicity's really scared because she thinks that Noel had the procedure and all of that. She still thinks it's this aggressive Noel from a few minutes ago. And she says, show me your chest. Let me see your chest.
He's like, oh, Felicity, I don't think we were there with that anymore.
Yeah.
But okay. Yeah.
And there's nothing there. Yeah. Still hard to see nipples, but the nipples are there, I'm sure, but no scar.
Yeah. But But before she does that, as he starts to walk towards her, she's like, back off. I'm not kidding. I'll kick your ass. I took a self-defense course over the summer, which just cracks me up hearing Felicity Porter say, I'll kick your ass. It just like cracks
I mean, it makes
up.
sense. She lives in New York City. She did get like mugged and all of that, right? Like in the one episode. So, sure, take a self-defense class. But yeah, Nola's like is like chuckling over this. And Felicity is so happy because she's like, oh my God, thank God. All of that was just one big nightmare. It's, perfect. I'm so happy. But Nola reminds her, except we're in this weird room and we don't know how we got here. And like, what the hell is going on? He's like, what elevator did you ride up? What hallway did you walk in? She's like, oh, I don't know. I just kind of like woke up on the floor, I guess.
Yeah, I love his whole little speech there of what elevator, what hallway did you go down? What door did you open? That whole little thing of him just, trying to drill home. Like, we have no idea where we are or how we got here. Oh, and by the way, there's no doors out of here either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I love Ben just like walking out of the shadows.
Yeah, because Noel did it first. Like, Noel walks out of the shadow, and then Ben walks out of the shadows. And he's like, this is creepy, guys. Guys, this is pretty creepy.
Yeah. And he says, we've examined every inch of this place. There's nothing. And they've been here for months. And then comes Julie. So Julie's there too. And it's like, wait a minute. Wasn't it just Christmas break? Like, we were just getting back to New York. Like, what's happening? And they're like, well, it was the four of us, because there comes Elena. And now it's all of them. And they're like, okay, well, we got to figure this out. Like, we got to use like normal logic. But they're all like, no, you can't use normal logic in this situation, And I appreciate it. She's like, who feeds us? Like, it's been months. Where does the food come from? Like, this must be a dream. We must be all hallucinating together.
Yeah.
So
and they're like, we've already gone through all the scenarios. Maybe we're all dead. Like, shout out to Lost. Maybe this is hell. Maybe we're kidnapped by aliens in a zoo, which is a reference to Twilight Zone stuff, So we've been through all the possible scenarios.
Yeah. It's Julie cracked me up in this moment. She says, no, sorry, not Julie. Someone says to, I think who is it? Is it Elena or Felicity that it says, Julie, I'm so sick of your optimism.
It's Noel. It is
Noel. That's
Noel.
who it is.
Yeah, because Felicity's like, are we in hell? And she's like, in hell with these two cute guys? I don't think so. And then we have to believe we're getting out of here. And Noel's like, Julie, I'm so sick of your optimism. Noel is so salty.
Yeah.
In this AS segment, I love it. I love Noel in the first part is fine. Noel in this part, I love, because this is like very much like post Felicity breakup Noel. He's channeling bitter, salty Noel. It's my favorite flavor of Noel, I think, because he like takes a few pot shots at Julie out of nowhere. Like, why he's so upset with this version of Julie, I guess maybe much like DBK, Noel is just
sick of her optimism
and can't stand her anymore.
I mean, I think if you've been stuck in a box with the same people for months, you're just gonna be annoyed with them anyway.
Yeah.
So the gist of it is like they've been here for months. They only remember college. They cannot remember anything prior to that. Like, they know facts about themselves. Like, Julie knows that she has adoptive parents. She doesn't know what they look like. There's no sunlight, no food, no water, no doors, no memory of anything that's happened before this. And so they're like, it's only a matter of time until we start asking ourselves, who are we? And maybe all of that was normal, and maybe that was the dream. Like, maybe this is what real life is.
I really love this because everything they're talking about, like everything they reference is things like, okay, the things that they remember are things that we've seen on the show.
Yes.
So they basically are. So the title of this episode actually comes from, it's based, not this episode, the title of the original Twilight Zone episode is based off of a play called 6 Characters in Search of an Author. And so this is kind of like a mixture of the, but they are characters. They are these characters stuck in a box, but they're just characters. They're just TV characters who are suddenly becoming aware of the fact that they are TV characters almost. They're becoming aware of the things that they usually don't talk about. Like, okay, yeah, Julie knows she has adoptive parents because she talks about them, but they've never been on the show, so she doesn't know what they look like. Yeah. Noel references, like, I've been going to college for nearly 3 years and have basically no friends. So they're like, we start off with Noel as a sophomore, and we don't see him hanging out with anybody other than Felicity and the people on his floor? Like,
Yes.
is Noel just that antisocial that he doesn't have any friends? Or is it just like, oh, the only friends he has are the actors that we have, the characters that we write for him to have friends and that sort of thing? And everything they're referencing is kind of like, oh yeah, we know little bits about ourselves, but it's only the stuff that's actually been on the show. If it hasn't been on the show yet, hasn't been written yet, it doesn't exist in their memories. So it's very much like kind of fourth wall breaking meta commentary on these are the characters, but they're not fully three-dimensional. They don't have full lives. They have just what the writers have created for them. I think that's like a really fun little bit of these characters being, oh, are we real or are we not? I really love that aspect of this part of the story.
Yeah, it's a really smart thing to do, and like the meta-ness of it all, I think is really fun. And to continue that point even further, we get a more salty Noel when Julie says like, oh, I wish I had my guitar. And he goes, thank God you don't have your guitar.
Cracked me up because it's like
so
out of the blue. Because again,
so nasty to her.
So nasty. Because we haven't seen like Noel and Julie have problems at all.
No, she's the one who warned him about like Felicity going away with Ben and everything. Like you'd think they'd have some sort of, you know, friendship there. And you know, they're all saying, oh, how am I going to do this? How am I going to do that? You know, Elena's worried about being a doctor and Noel's, how am I going to be a graphic designer? And I love Ben. Okay, Ben, from this moment to the end of the episode, 10 out of 10, truly just cracked me up when they ask him, what are you going to do with your life, Ben? Because again, the only things we really know about Ben is like, he likes to swim while the swimming team is over. About it. That's all I got. I don't know what he's going to school for. You know, he did a good job at that one like presentation in season one time. That's about it. And so when they ask him, what are you going to do with your life, Ben? He goes, nothing. Not a damn thing. He's so like broody about it. And I just love it so much. And they're like, oh, what are we going to do? Like, there's nowhere to go, whatever. Ben gets up and he just runs into a wall. And I can't even explain how hard this made me laugh, especially because then it's like, what is it? Noel says, nice one. At least I'm man enough to try. And Noel says, at least I'm smart enough not to run into walls.
I love it so much. I love this whole, again, this is like just a very small part of the episode. Like this is just like the last like 10 minutes
but
of
it's
the
so
episode.
good.
It's so good. I wish it had been more, but maybe if it stretched out more, it would have lost some of its impact. They might not have been able to maintain it over an entire episode. But for being like just a small, compact thing, there's just so many great moments in it. But yeah, Ben just like biffing it, running straight into the wall, and no, nice one. Just like crack me up.
Yeah. It's so over the top, and I agree with you, Todd. I think if they stretch it for the whole episode, maybe it's not as strong. But I think this goes to show, like I often say, like bottle episodes or scenes where we have all the characters interacting together. I'm thinking of like the Thanksgiving episodes of Felicity are always my favorite because you get to see the dynamics between everyone in like one scene. And they're often the most compelling because they're very character focused. And that's why I think this scene is so strong, because we're now 1.5 seasons in. So we have a lot of prior stuff to draw from, a lot of history with these characters, especially with one another. And they're all just like, it's like they're even over the top. They're like over the top versions of who they already are. So I really love this. I especially love when Ben runs into the wall and then he falls back. He like straight up falls back onto the floor, like so dramatically. I loved everything about this scene. I think this was like the part of the episode that worked the most for me. And maybe it was because, like, again, I'm not as familiar with the Twilight Zone, so it took me a while to really like grasp onto what the hell was going on and like why we were getting this episode. And I think having all of your characters there locked in a box together is really just like a compelling way to get some really fun character commentary.
Yeah. And I also think there is even though it's all Twilight Zone, there is a big shift in tone between the two segments. Like everything before this was like super creepy and super ominous and super mysterious and what's going on, the dead, blah, blah, blah. And this is just like characters interacting. It's weird. It's mysterious, but it's not as creepy. It's not as ominous. It's not as out there in a lot of ways. And the characters are being a little bit more themselves. Like there's still a little bit of the Twilight Zone-esque stuff, but here you're getting snarky Noel instead of emotionless Noel. Here you have Julie being Julie instead of the emotionless Julie from before. Elena is probably the one who's like feels the weirdest, but Elena is just like constantly moving. She's like jogging in place and running.
Yes.
Does this when she first walks out of the shadow, she does this really weird move into a kneel. Like it's almost like she's kneeling to like she's like doing a curtsy or a bow to Felicity before she winds up just kneeling on the ground on both knees. It's like really, Elena is just doing all sorts of really funky moves. And I wondered if it was like a reference to the ballerina doll in the original episode, because she's always moving in like ballerina ways as she moves, but it's not really ballerina. It's just like very bizarre. Like Elena in this sequence is probably the most off compared to the rest of them. And I don't know why.
I guess if I'm like looking, if I'm stretching to find reasons for it to give it like credibility, Elena usually is a very busy person between her studies and everything else she has going on in her life. She's constantly doing things. I feel like if she's trapped in a box with absolutely nothing to do, in her mind, logically, she's like, well, the best way to make the most effective use of this time when I have nothing else to do is to exercise, and I will run and stay in shape. Like if I'm stretching to find like a reason why she would do that,
And that stuff I can get behind. It's really like her moving to the kneel. As soon as she sees
that's
Felicity.
Weird. Yeah,
that thing was just so bizarre. I still don't know, but I agree, because even as she's doing the exercise and she's talking about how all the time that she's wasting, all the time that she's missing, so that makes sense. It's the kneeling, it's the going down to both knees in like this really bizarre way that makes no sense to me. But no, it is a very different tone between the first part and the last part, but that's also Twilight Zone. Because I kind of said, the Twilight Zone is an anthology series that has all sorts of different tones. Sometimes it's super serious, sometimes it's super goofy, and you never know from one episode to the next what you're going to get with the Twilight Zone. So I like that this episode is kind of paying homage to two very different types of episodes and type of vibes. They're still 100% Twilight Zone.
Yeah. And so at this point, they say, what if we stand on each other's shoulders? Like maybe we can reach the top. And this was really funny watching Felicity try to climb this like single file human pyramid, especially when Todd, like, we know the movie magic stuff. Like we all know they're actually just laying horizontally on the ground. So that took me out of it for just a second, because I mean, we all know that's actually what's happening, but it was still really funny. Felicity gets to the top and they're all like, what's going on? Did you make it? And so she reaches up, she grabs the top and she throws herself over. And suddenly the big twist is revealed. Meghan picks up a teeny tiny little Felicity doll, says, oh, how did you get out of there? Get back in there with your little friends. And she puts her in the box. She's in Meghan's box. And we see all the other dolls in the box as well.
Yeah, I remember whenever I first watched this going, of course, why did I not guess this before it actually happened? I should have known that's what was going on. As soon as they were in a box they couldn't get out of course it's going to be made. They even like started the episode with conversations about the box. I should have known the box was going to. I was like so
exactly like they told us from the beginning, right? Like they showed the box at the very beginning. Like you'd think, like I agree with you. I felt very similarly. I know our friend Emily felt very similarly. That it's like, oh, I should have known. But I also think a lot of times with Felicity, like we also do Buffy here on the podcast, and like Buffy is a show. I feel like I'm constantly looking and analyzing and like trying to figure things out. Felicity is more of a vibes show. Like there's usually not a ton of mystery, so it's not like my brain is actively trying to parse things out. So maybe that's why it kind of slipped by. I love it though. I think it's perfect. I think it's hilarious. I love the idea that Meghan has little dolls of all the people she knows in a box. And I love the idea, Todd. I think it is fitting that who was it? Meghan's parents that looked in the box. And they were like, or no, someone looked in the box, right?
No, it was Meghan's parents, because because Felicity had been a good person and pretend the box was her. Not actually, no, she wasn't being a good person. She did it to kind of get under Meghan's skin. Oh, that's my box, and Meghan would love to know what's in the box. Except I make a big deal about it. Oh, Meghan's like. And so Felicity was just trying to, get under Meghan's skin by proclaiming the box was hers. But then Meghan's dad was like, we looked in the box and we think you need to get help.
And this would make sense if you had dolls that looked like everybody. Although theoretically there wouldn't be a Meghan doll. So Felicity would be like just her and her friends, I guess.
Yeah. I think the only thing from that doesn't really fit is like Felicity like, I'll throw it away. It's like, oh, you can't do that. And why would he say that if it was
maybe
actually
he
dolls?
thinks it's kind of like a superstitious sort of thing where you can't like poke them with needles and stuff. I don't know. But I love
that
this.
Meghan changes what's in her box. I'd like to think that as Meghan evolves in her witchcraft, this could be because these dolls have
she's done spells.
She's done spells. She is like evolving in her magic, and the dolls did say they've only been there for a few months, so it's not like the balls have been there from the beginning.
That's true.
Maybe she had other witchcraft paraphernalia in the box initially, and now she's replaced that with these little voodoo doll things of the friends. And maybe the reason Felicity's in there is because she was like been working on trying to get the Felicity doll right, and she finally finished that one and put it in there. I agree. I think this would be like a really fun explanation of what's actually in the box. I think like the box being a receptacle for Meghan's witchcraft related, shenanigans makes a lot of sense. And her having voodoo dolls of the people that she kind of is in this frenemy relationship with makes a lot of sense. So I could get behind that these are little dolls that she has, cast magic on and has imbued them with some of the personality of the people that she knows. And also maybe that's why they only know certain things, because Meghan only knows certain things about them. Like, oh, I heard Julie talking about her stupid adopted parents, so I know that about her. That could be a thing that you could explain away why these characters don't know anything. It's because it's only what Meghan knows about them, as she has created these dolls that are somehow linked to them in some way. She's trying to create little homunculi based on Felicity stuff. So I could definitely see that being an actual explanation for what's in the box. So I could lean towards this being what's really in the box. I think that could actually work. But who knows? I do want to say really quickly that the shot of Felicity at the top of the box and then falling off, and then the shot of like the face down Felicity doll are almost like perfect recreations of a similar scene in the Twilight Zone episode of the Major fall, the way that Felicity falls and the way the Major falls, and then the way the Major's doll is lying there in the snow and Felicity's lying on a white sheet. It looks very, very similar. So I thought those were a couple, because I rewatched the Twilight Zone episode last night as well to refamiliarize myself with it. And there are a ton of similarities between the two things. Like the conversations aren't similar, except for wondering if they're dead and all. But that shot right there at the very end, it's like very, very close and very much a like direct, homage to it instead of just like a broader homage. So I just wanted to shout that out.
Yeah, that's great. And I do love the ending. Like we have the narrator coming back in saying Felicity Porter stuck inside a box, but not just a box, which happens to be the sole magical possession of her roommate, but another kind of box, a strange gray area where what you want, what you need, and what you'll be are forever in question. Felicity Porter in a place called college. I just it's fun. It's good. Like I thought it was a weird episode to be sure. And I think not every single thing worked for me, but it certainly ended on a very strong note. And I feel like it's the best answer for the question that we could have gotten,
Yeah, it is one of my favorite episodes of the show. Not surprising. Whenever you guys first started covering Felicity, this was like the one of the episodes. Like, okay, this is the episode I need to be on. I figured it was the one episode that I could request, and no one else would be fighting me for it. Yeah. Also, because first season I wanted to be on the Assassin Game episode because I had lots of stories from playing the Assassin Game in college myself. So I didn't get a chance to talk about those. So I got my second favorite episode of the season there from what I remember. But this was the episode I need to volunteer for this one because I love it. It's weird and, meta and all that stuff. But also I figured that almost no one else you would have on to guest would have actually seen the Twilight Zone episode.
No, you're the perfect guest for it, Todd. We all know. Yeah.
So So yeah, but yeah, I love the episode. Even beyond it being a Twilight Zone homage, I think it does lots of really fun stuff. I think that there's lots of great moments, and if it was placed anywhere else in the series, it probably would have gone over a lot better for a lot of people. Because I do know people were like, "Oh, I just want to know what happened to be continued. What are you doing here?"
Yeah, that's the one indictment that I would say that the episode has. It's just its placement. Like it's just so, it's in such a bad spot. And I feel like with the content of it, especially revolving around the love triangle and Felicity being love obsessed and wanting to rid herself of these, these feelings, you really could kind of slot that into a lot of places because Felicity's like that a lot. And we're going to have more love triangle stuff. I'm sure of it. So it really does feel like a bad spot to put it in, especially for a show that, like, back in the day, there weren't binge shows out there. So it's just, it's a really awkward spot to have this episode fall.
Yeah, I think if they shifted to just one episode earlier, just
I
have
agree.
it before, because that would also be, we're coming back. We don't need to see them come back from Christmas break. We don't really need to see, we can have Felicity reference the fact that they just came back from Christmas break, and it would work just as well because it's just such a weird episode. Is it canon? Not really. Nothing that happens is really canonical unless we decide that the Meghan with the dolls thing is what actually is happening. But
so maybe we need to vote now and decide, does Sara deserve a purse? Did we find out what's in Meghan's box? Do you have any strong opinions on this, Todd?
Oh man, so I have a hard time saying this is a canonical answer to what's in Meghan's box, but we did reveal what was in Meghan's box, and the thing was, I think the bet was, are they ever going to reveal what's in Meghan's box? And Adam said they're never going to reveal what's in Meghan's box, and they did reveal what's in Meghan's box. Now, is it really what's in Meghan's box? I think that's where Adam would quibble and say he's not going to buy Sara a purse. But I think, depending on the language of the original bet, I think that this could definitely fulfill those qualifications. And it's not just because I enjoy seeing Adam lose. No, it's not just that. But no, I think that this is the thing that, and you could wait till the end of the series to see if there's anything else that ever gets brought up about the box. And then at the end say, well, yep, this was it after all, or maybe there's something else. Who knows? But I would just say, you're like, well, are we really going to say that Felicity of all shows is going to have like a magical thing being the explanation? And I'll just say, we have seen magic possibly work before on the show with Meghan spells.
Yeah, love spells and stuff.
There definitely was a sense there might have been something magical going on there. No spoilers, but I will say that there's, possibility there could be some other things along those lines that happen at some point that could make this be maybe not, as weird as you think it is. So I'm open to like the idea that Meghan has these dolls and all this was like related to this weird magic that Meghan is doing. I think that could fit in this show, which otherwise is pretty grounded, but has had some things that are maybe not as grounded. But I'm also someone who always leans towards the supernatural in this sort of situation when watching shows. Like if there's a hint that something supernatural might happen on a show that's otherwise grounded, I'll believe it. I'll take it. I don't care if it breaks the world for other people. Like, oh yeah, there's magic. Fine. That's me. So what other people think, I don't know. What about you, Jess? Do you think that this counts?
Yeah. If I had to do like a yes or no, I think I would say yes, this counts. And the reason I think it counts is because unless the wording was what's canonically in Meghan's box, we did get an answer to what's in Meghan's box. Is it real? We don't know yet, but we do have a answer. So I would argue, yes, she does earn the purse, but we'll have to follow up with her next podcast and see what her thoughts are, what her and Adam discussed and all of that. But before we get into feedback, Todd, we have to award a character a point for this episode. I feel like Meghan feels like the very easy pick in terms of it's her box, it's her playthings. Without her, the episode, in my opinion, doesn't work. But I'm open to hearing other arguments if you have any.
Yeah, I think the only problem with Meghan is she's barely in the episode. I think that's like the the big ding against Meghan, because she's in like 3 scenes and just really briefly. But in those 3 scenes, she's super ominous. She makes fun of the tapes, and then she is like the keeper of the box. So I think that Meghan is like a really good pick here. The only other person that I like even thought about is like, I kind of want to give it to Snarky Noel from the box. Not Heartless Noel, but I kind of want to give it to Snarky Noel from the box.
Yeah.
But I think overall Meghan being like the driving force in a meta way makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Because I was like, plus her look too, like really, I don't know, just solidified it for me. I absolutely love her look in this episode as well. Plus I love are you still talking to that recording thing? It's just it's so good. We did get some feedback, so let's hear from Linda. She says she's been looking forward for this episode since you guys said you were doing Felicity, and especially since the box bet was made. I love this episode. I grew up loving the Twilight Zone, and this episode is such a fun nod to it. Scott Foley and Carrie Russell are phenomenal in this episode, channeling classic 60s acting styles. Also, the beginning is such a nice break from the doo-ba-doo.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So we didn't really talk about the opening credits, but they are very much Twilight Zone. Like the music is kind of a take on the Twilight Zone theme, and then like you see weird things floating through space, which is a thing that happened on the old Twilight Zone opening credits. So it's a really fun nod, and even the closing credits. So the closing credits just is a shot of the dolls in the box with the credits running over it with that music playing, and that's how the Twilight Zone would end, with like one shot from the episode on screen as the credits rolled over it. So they are mimicking the Twilight Zone not just in the opening, but also the way that they do the closing credits as well.
Yeah, it's perfect. Linda continues, this doctor guy, I hate to waste a cup. Well, I'd hate to break your nose if you try to make me drink some random ass crap. Beat it, weirdo. She also pointed out that when Meghan talks about making the ridiculous tapes, that Meghan has become Sara and I. Just yelling at Felicity. Felicity was so channeling Richard when she went back to the clinic to confront the doctor. She was giving full on, I'm going to report your ass vibes. I bet if someone gave you 3 guesses prior to this episode of what's in Meghan's box, Felicity, Noel, Ben, and Julie and Elena would not be one of them. Can't wait for the debate of whether or not this counts as revealing the contents of Meghan's box. That is so funny. We'll have to wait to hear the fallout next week from Sara and see what her and Adam, what decision they've come to. The thing is I know Adam is behind on Felicity, so I don't even think he's seen the episode, which is even funnier to think about them trying to have that argument. All right, let's hear from Temmie. Let's hear what he had to say about this episode.
Hi, people. What's black and white and red all over? Todd, have you ever been to the Library of Congress? This episode is straight from a time machine. What are your favorite movies or TV shows that deal with time travel, that might have time machines? And then also, what are your favorite movies or TV shows that are in black and white, if you have any? I would say my favorite time machine or time travel show that I recently watched was Dark, a show on Netflix that is a German language series.
Love Dark, Temmie.
Helped me learn about the forest. Wald is forest in German, so it's kind of cool. And my favorite, I think, black and white movie, I think, is Rafifi. Rafifi is a movie that Carrie Russell's character in The Americans uses to engage with a target of hers that she's going to manipulate later. So I watched the actual movie and it was really, really very interesting. And then also, what is your favorite color? My favorite color is blue because when I was an adult, going to school and going to college, walking home, I saw Twilights. I was like, I love this color better than sunsets, Twilights. And Twilights have that blue and yellow vintage. Thanks. Bye.
Okay, Todd, have you been to the Library of Congress?
I've never been inside. I've been by it. I've only been to DC a couple of times. I didn't really have time to do it. I have met many people who work for the Library of Congress through at library conferences. In fact, I recently did a musical skit at a library conference with a Library of Congress librarian. Yeah, it was a presentation that was like, it's a musical skit. It's like a Star Wars themed parody. I got to play C-3PO and sing a parody of "I'm Just Ken, I'm Just 3."
Oh, that's so fun.
So but I've never have been to Library of Congress. There's someplace I want to go, but I just never have had a good chance. So whenever I went the first time to DC, I was in 8th grade, and there's no way I was getting the other kids on the trip with me to go to the Library of Congress. We had to go to the National History Museum to see the dinosaurs. And then whenever I went as an adult, also there's no way I was getting the people I was with had to go to the Library of Congress because we had to go to all of the memorials and things like that. So it's definitely on my bucket list, but it's not something that I have been able to do, unfortunately.
Yeah. Also, Tammy, I love Dark. I think it is like probably one of the best pieces of media that does time travel. So that would have probably been my pick. But Todd, do you have any suggestions for time travel media?
Yeah, I mean, I love time travel. Much like Kevin Modeo, I love time travel stuff. It's like one of my favorite things. But it's also one of the things that I have a hard time if they don't do it well. So I like well done time travel stuff is some of my favorite stuff, and bad time travel stuff is some of my least favorite stuff. So in terms of stuff that I love, so I will say I need to finish Dark. I watched the first season and loved it, but I have not finished it yet. And it's on my list, but it's something that I have to pay so close attention to that I have not gone back and redone it because it's just, so much attention has to be paid, especially because I'm not watching subtitles. I'm watching with subtitles because the dubbing is horrendous.
It's
the dubbing
so bad. You lose
legendarily
so much.
bad. It's so bad that I tried to watch. So my dad and I watched the first season of it when it first came out because I heard lots of people talking about it. The dubbing is so bad that my dad, who hates subtitles, is like, turn the subtitles on. Because he could not handle the dubbing. So Dark is definitely up there. In terms of like other time travel media, I love 12 Monkeys. 12 Monkeys is one of my all-time favorite movies. Time travel with Bruce Willis and Brad Pitt. It's a Terry Gilliam film, so it's kind of weird. And then there was a TV series based off of it as well, which is also really good and takes a story and expands it and goes like really bizarre direction. So I think 12 Monkeys is one of my favorite time travel things. I also got to shout out my, records a horror movie. There's a horror movie called Time Crimes, which is a time travel horror movie thing, which is a lot of fun. And then Donnie Darko kind of sort of has time travel stuff in it. It's weird. I love time travel. One of my favorite things. I actually have I have a list of like time travel movies ranked on Letterboxd. It's like all of the time travel movies I've seen, and I have them ranked from favorite to least favorite. Least favorite is Sound of Thunder. I hate Sound of Thunder with a bloody passion. I hate that movie. I hate that movie. I hate that movie. It changes the rules of time travel halfway through the film, and that's like the one thing. Like, I don't care how ridiculous your rules are for your thing as long as they're consistent. But once you start to ignore the rules you set for yourself, it really bothers me. It's one of the things that does bother me about Doctor Who is like whenever they ignore their own rules, I'm like, guys, I know there's like way too many years of this show, but even in New Who, you set this thing up during Eccleston's run, and now you're saying the exact opposite during Tennant's run. Come on, people. Doctor Who's another good time travel show sometimes. Go watch Blink. Blink is one of the best episodes of the show, one of the best time travel episodes of Doctor Who.
Yeah. All right. We also have a voicemail from DBK. Let's see if he also was annoyed with Julie's optimism.
What up, though, ladies? Help for the Lovelorn, the Twilight Zone, parody episode. I think they're doing 2 episodes of Twilight Zone in this. I'm not sure if you guys are Twilight Zone fans, if you ever watched it. I always remember the one where there's the pretty person and then everyone has the pig faces. I think that's a pretty famous Twilight Zone episode. But anyways, some funny lines in this episode. Felicity is wearing Ben's necklace again in at least the morgue scene I caught. Yeah, and also we learned what's in the box. They're in the box. So congratulations to Sara on her fancy new purse that Adam has to buy her. I feel kind of bad because I'm sure Adam will say this isn't like a canon episode, but there will be like a couple subtle references. Well, one that you guys should pick up, and then there's like a subtle reference to this episode as well. I'll point it out later. I mean, I don't feel super bad to Adam because he once said this about Felicity.
Eyes for Felicity. Yeah, only has eyes for Felicity, which is really tough. I think at that table, especially if like one of the people I'm looking at is Felicity, it's like really that's the person we only have eyes for. Elena is incredible.
So I mean, I don't feel super bad, but I mean, you at least deserve a medium price purse because, like, yeah, you should die on this hill. We found out what's in the box, Sara. I will say that. Yeah. Next week's episode is The Slump. We will be picking up the to be the continued episode, and it is going to be a good one because it's JJ and Matt together again doing an episode. I'm not sure the last time we got them on an episode together, but yeah, I'll report back on the commentary if there's any good stuff. All right, till next week, ladies. Peace.
I love when DBK comes in with the receipts. That is absolutely hysterical. It sounds like the voice of the people is that Sara gets a purse. That's like the third person besides us, Todd, that has said, no, she gets the purse.
Yeah, and Adam will just say that's typical. Adam will just say, oh yeah, the whole world's against me. Everyone's always against me. That's just typical. So yeah, which is true. Hey, I'm not going to deny that. Maybe Adam brings it upon himself a little bit. Who can say?
He asked for it.
We can say he asked for it for sure, but
I also love DBK saying she at least deserves like a medium style purse or something.
Yeah.
Like there's an agreement there.
Yeah, we'll give a concession. We'll give a concession.
Yeah, at least a medium purse. He also did send in some fun facts that he had learned from the commentary. Apparently it was at the Radio Music City Hall night for an award that J.J. Abrams approached Lamont about doing this episode, directing this episode. The time period is supposed to be ambiguous, which is why the tape recorder and the answering machine are kind of in there. You know, we see Felicity talking on like a phone with a cord, you know, all that stuff. We talked about the opening credits, Todd. Apparently J.J. Abrams did the opening credits on his Mac.
Oh, wow.
I mean, himself. Yeah.
It shows, I'll say, but also, yeah.
And he apparently the director talked about the acting tone was trying to have the actors be more quote unquote earnest because that was more of the like Twilight Zone sort of vibe. At the time of this commentary, the episode was 40 years old, so it's probably closer to 60 now. That must have been the Twilight Zone episode. That would make sense for okay. I was like, what the heck? Scott Foley was uncomfortable with his trapping Felicity in the chair scene, the part where he's getting like very aggressive. He mentions the 5 characters that what it's based off of, Todd, that you mentioned earlier. And then he talks about using like an old dolly and a wider lens with the actual like shooting of the specific human ladder scene. I mean, I liked this episode. Like I said, I think my biggest gripe with it is just where it falls. I think it was like, I appreciate it way more now having you here, Todd, to kind of give me a more context for it. I feel like anybody who likes the Twilight Zone probably loved this episode. I think people who don't watch the Twilight Zone could be possibly confused, and I get it. I think like my favorite part was the everything in the box. That was like my absolute favorite moments of the episode. And I love that we at least get some answer to what's in Meghan's box, whether or not you want to say it's canonical. At least we have some answer. So we're not like wondering the rest of our lives, what's in Meghan's box, you know?
Yeah. Like I said, one of my favorite episodes of the show. And I wouldn't call myself a super Twilight Zone fan, but I've watched a lot of it. And so just seeing anytime someone does like an homage like this, you can just tell like the love that JJ has for the original show, and to bring in like the original director to come in and do this stuff and recreate the feeling, even like bringing in like the dolly and the stuff that he knows to give it the sense of like the acting and things like that. Just like so much care is going into this. In a way, it's not the full extent, but it reminds me of like a lot of the Dan Harmon Community episodes, where the reason that those Community episodes work so well is because Dan Harmon has an affection for those genres and is trying to do them right. He's not just doing a slapdash, thing like season 4 does for their homages of stuff. Like all the Harmon season Community, if they're doing an homage to a genre or a show or that sort of thing, they do it with a sense of maybe poking fun at a little bit, which I think this maybe does a little bit for the Twilight Zone stuff, but also a real affection and real knowledge of what makes those things work and like recreating that. And so I think that's one of the reasons why it's not just always do it in black and white and have people act all weird. It actually is like evoking that sense of the time and evoking the feeling of that sort of stuff. So for those people who are familiar with it, it always going to work for them better. But it's always a question. So like I said, like it didn't necessarily work for you as well because you're not familiar with Twilight Zone. And it's always like the danger of this type of homage thing. Recently, the last couple episodes of Pushing Daisies we've talked about, there have been homages to like some old Hitchcock stuff. And like Adam and Lindy had never seen Vertigo, so they didn't get that homage. There's a big homage to the birds in the one for the most recent episode that Marissa and Lindy and I talked about. And Marissa and I both got the birds homage, and Lindy had no idea. So that whole sequence, Lindy's just going, what is going on here? It's like it's like a double-edged sword. So for people who love this stuff or at least familiar with it, it clicks. But people who have never watched an episode of Twilight Zone like the show has to be really well done in order to get you to like it. And the fact that you wound up liking it, you maybe liked it more after like learning what it was, but you did enjoy parts of it beforehand. And I think that's because like the skill that went into making the episode.
Yeah. Again, like I totally agree with you. You can tell passion and like excitement went into it versus like just doing it to do it. Like he actually cared and took the time to get things right, get the director that directed some episodes of the Twilight Zone. Like there was a lot of care and love and skill that went into this episode that I can appreciate. It's mostly just the fact of like, gosh, they're making us wait another week, which obviously I would not care about if I wasn't watching week to week. If I was just binging the show, wouldn't have bothered me. So, there is something to be said for like how you consume the show. I know like there's a lot of talk about The Bear season 3, the first episode, like whether or not people liked it because it didn't really further the plot at all. But yeah, I did come away from this episode like liking it more than not liking it. But I'm excited next week to get back to the regular canonical plot of Felicity in the slump. That's next week's episode, so I'm excited.
I am looking forward to you guys watching that episode. Without being any big spoilers, there's a new character introduced in the episode who is one of my favorite characters on the show. So I'll be curious to see how you guys react to this character.
That's exciting.
But I love this character. I love what they bring to the show. I love the things that they facilitate. And I don't want to say any more you'll know when the new character is there. It's like definitely a very I just rewatched the episode last night as well, just to make sure there weren't any references to this in that episode, and there really aren't. So but I'm excited to see if you guys enjoy the episode while also getting annoyed and angry at some of the characters the way that I get annoyed and angry.
I'm sure we will.
It's you're in for a fun time, I think.
Yeah, and we're going to be joined by your co-host. You mentioned her name before. Lindy is going to be coming on the podcast to chat about this episode with us. So we'll catch up with Sara, get an update on the purse situation. We'll do our character rankings next time as well. And thank you so much, Todd, for helping me hold down the fort, walking me through, holding my hand through Help for the Forlorn. If people want to hear more about what you're up to,
I just have to say, Help for the Lovelorn, not the Forlorn.
Oh, Lovelorn. See, Forlorn just feels like a word you should say, though. Lovelorn doesn't. Help for the Lovelorn. Yeah. Lovelorn does not roll off the tongue, I have to say.
No. And you said it earlier, I'm like, I'll just let it slide. I'm not.
No, then I said it twice, and I really poked you, didn't I, Todd?
Yeah.
So where else can people find you? What else do you have going on?
So you can find me on most social media at Librarian Todd, because Todd Librarian is too many characters. You can find me over at Whirlwind Podcasts on a few different things. I'm, of course, One of those Scribble Podcasts, where we're going through Pushing Daisies. We're almost done with season 1 of Pushing Daisies. And if you've ever wanted to hear Lindy be negative about something, that's a podcast to go listen to, because Lindy does not like the show and is regretting her life choices agreeing to podcast about the show that Adam insists is the best show we've ever covered. So it's a lot of fun dynamics over on One of those Scribble Podcast right now. Also, tuning in where Tommy and I go through different cartoons. In a couple of weeks, we'll be going through the recent show Scavenger's Reign, which I've heard amazing things about.
It's really good. Yes,
I've heard great things. It used to be on Max. Max got rid of it, but now it's on Netflix. So we're hoping that more people will watch it on Netflix. So Netflix will pick it up for a second season. As soon as I get done with this podcast, I will be starting my binge of Scavenger's Reign, which I've not watched yet. And we're recording tomorrow, so I need to watch it. But also on Whirlwind, we're doing Previously on Shameless, where Sara is leading Adam and myself through Shameless. I think our coverage of season 3 just dropped. We're way ahead on recording those. We recorded through the end of season 4, so I'm lost on where we actually are with dropping episodes. But I think season 3 of Shameless just started with Adam and I trying to deal with the craziness of that show. And also, you mentioned the bear. We did have some bear coverage where Marissa and Jason talked to the bear, and I was on episode 3 of season 3 talking about one of my favorite episodes of the season. So that was a lot of fun. And then Whirlwind, we also have Veronica Mars coverage, Doctor Who coverage, covered Ren Fair recently. Jess and Sarah were there with Pretty Little Liars Summer School. We have some other stuff percolating to come out in the near future, hopefully. So if you want to know more about that, you can visit our website, whirlwindpodcast.com, or you can reach out to us at our Twitter or Instagram at whirlwindpod.
Perfect. You can find me here on Shit 90 Shows covering Felicity, covering Buffy. And then over on Talking Shit, Stuart and I are, we're still at the very beginning of season 2 of Schitt's Creek. So that has been a ton of fun as well. Go check out all of those fun things. And give us a rating or review while you're at it. You know, we appreciate it. We love when people have feedback for us. Of course, if you want to send in feedback at Shit90spod on Twitter and Instagram, shit90spod.com is the way to do so. You can send us in a voicemail, send us in an email. Just let us know your thoughts. And we will be back next week to catch up with Sara on season 2, episode 12, The Slump. Until next time, everyone, have a good one. Bye.
Just ask. Shit 90 Shows taught me.
Shit 90 Shows Taught Me was not filmed before a live studio audience.